America is an amazing country filled with wonderful people who do incredible things. But too often, the media and liberal politicians ignore big parts of our nation and the people who make it work. So I'm speaking with leaders and policymakers who deal with real problems every day. I'm Ronna McDaniel, and this is Real America. Today, I'm speaking with Congressman Burgess Owens of Utah, and we're going to cover issues facing real Americans outside the bubble, from his time in the NFL and what's going on in professional sports to traditional family values and critical race theory. So I am so excited to be here today with you, Burgess Owens. I just met you a few weeks ago for the first time in Idaho. We were doing an event together. But as a new freshman congressman, you are traveling the country everywhere. Tell me what it's like to be new in Congress. Are you enjoying it?
I really am, Ron, and thanks so much for this opportunity. I really look forward to it. It's interesting. At the end of the day, I ended up with a team that won when I was back when the Raiders used to win football games. And I remember a moment sitting in the locker room after losing for 12 years before that in high school, college, and with the Jets for 7 years. And I remember thinking, as I looked around the room, I cannot believe I'm sitting here with these guys. We're getting ready to go out to play the biggest game of my life in the locker room, Super Bowl 15. And to be honest with you, that's kind of where I feel now. It's just what an honor, not only to be with the freshman team that came in this year, but with a House of Representatives really want to get this thing together. And meeting people like yourself, Vice President Pence, and having a chance to talk with President Trump back during the campaign, it's really been an honor. And I look forward to just doing my part. The thing about where we are today, it's really a team effort, and all of us have our part to play. I'm just thankful that I'm on the field of action right now, not in the stands or on
Well, you're like an MVP already, and you're only in your freshman year. It's like your rookie year, and you're already an MVP. But for people who don't know, you were just elected in Utah, but you had a whole career in the NFL before that. And I want to start with your childhood.
Okay.
A little bit. You grew up in the Deep South. You were put on a high school football team, and you were one of 4 black players to be put on that team and integrated in pretty much an all-white school.
Yeah.
Tell me about your experience with that and how that shaped you.
I grew up in the Deep South in the 60s, days of KKK, Jim Crow, and segregation. And I like to always make sure as quickly as I can let people know how proud I am to have been raised by that generation of remarkable men and women. It was a generation that kind of highlighted really what America's all about. We were not assimilating just like the Jewish and the Polish and Italian. None of us, we weren't assimilating as we are today. But we all had one thing in common, it's cultures. We believe in our country. We believe in meritocracy. We had dads who came back from World War II who taught us how to really respect and love our country and our flag. And it was the greatest community I could have been raised in. Now, I wasn't exposed to white Americans until I was 16 years old.
Really?
So everything that I've learned, my foundation is based on that community I grew up in. And the point I like to make is because one of the biggest fights we're going to have as a country to get ourselves back, we have to learn our history. We have to realize how great of a country we have been as a people. Not that we're perfect, but no one is, no one ever will be.
Yep.
But the fact is, we had a country that if you just tie into the 4 basic tenets, that no matter where you come from, what language you speak, you come here, you're within a generation away from middle class. And those tenets is what I grew up in. We learned our faith, family, free market, and education. Those 4 tenets that if anybody ties into, be patient, continue to get back up when they fall flat in the face, they literally will not only be successful in this country, but feel blessed that they're in a country that gives them these opportunities.
So that foundation started with you young. Then you said when you were 16, is that when you went to high school and started football as the first time?
That was, yeah.
And what was that like?
If you remember the movie, Remember the Titans.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I do know that movie.
Yeah, that was kind of an idea of what it was all about. It was a year in which the first couple of years was pretty tough. But what we were doing as a culture, as a generation, we were overcoming the prejudice of our fathers. And I talked with some of my friends today that we didn't get a chance to be as close as we really wish we had been because we're learning who we were. We're learning that color is not the issue, that we can get past that if we just find those things we have in common.
You were so young.
It was young, and I tell you, as you just mentioned that, the lessons I learned, and I remember my mom and dad were just remarkable people, they really were. My mom standing with me in the kitchen, and I must have made a comment, but she made her statement that's lived with me from that point on. She said, Burgie, just remember, do not let someone else's problem become yours. She was teaching me in one way not to let a racist turn me into one. And that has been with me ever since. I've now learned through the process that we don't judge each other by our color. What happens in this country, unlike any other nation in the history of mankind, every generation we get better at looking at each other from inside out versus outside in.
Exactly.
And that's because of our Judeo-Christian values.
But it's so important to have these conversations like you and I are having, but more around the country. And I feel like we're losing that a little bit. You went to high school, then you went to University of Miami, similar issues.
Yeah.
You were drafted in the first draft in the NFL. You played for the Jets, then you went to the Raiders and won the Super Bowl. So I think you have a really great insight as to what's happening in the NFL right now.
Yeah.
With the national anthem, with Colin Kaepernick kneeling for the flag. Tell me how you see this and this issue that's percolating through our sports worlds right now, and a belief, I think, with a lot of people that America is a racist country.
Well, let me just say the most powerful three words in the mission statement of America is "We the people." You know, once we start talking, once we start realizing we have more in common than we don't, there's nothing that can defeat us. What's happening today is the fact that we've had an educational system for decades that's been teaching us something else. We have an educational system, and I call them termites. These are people who do not love our country. They find safe spots, and that's in education, that's in bureaucracy. We don't know who they are. It's behind cameras where no one can really impact them. But when we start teaching each other that our country is a racist place, that our country does not identify and show that we've been progressing, that everyone in this country that actually adheres themselves to American tenets can be successful. If you don't teach our kids that, they learn another way. And so what we're seeing today, and Carpenter is a good example. Here's a young man who made his last contract year, made $12 million. You notice that those who believe in this concept of how bad our country is, as they reimagine, first of all, they never imagined anything in the first place. They've never built anything. They don't serve. They don't give them their time. They're elitists. And that's really the fight that we have as a nation. It's not just black elitists, but white elitists. But they both have that's who we're really fighting up against. So what we're seeing today in NFL is a result of years of indoctrination. Unlike my parents' generation, I was taught very simply, Ron, it was really easy. Love God, country, family, respect for women and authority. It's real simple.
I like that.
Think about it.
Love God, country, family, respect for women and authority. Okay, I'm remembering that for my 16-year-old son. Okay, and I'm going to say Burgess Owens told me to tell you this. Okay.
Tell him it works, and if you highlight and stay those tenets, you'll be a very happy person.
Yeah.
If you don't, you'll be miserable.
You
like
will
the
be
left is.
miserable, like people who have a $12 million football contract.
These people are miserable, and they will not be happy until everybody around them are miserable. So unfortunately, unlike my generation, I grew up in a time, and I remember standing on the sideline. We weren't making the big money. We did not have the opportunity to play in certain positions, because in those days, quarterback, middle linebacker, free safety, and center were white leadership positions. And we'll talk about that when we get to critical race theory. But yet, we felt so blessed that we're doing something we enjoyed, paying relatively good income, and just enjoying the process. I remember standing on the sideline, seeing that flag wave, hearing the national anthem, getting teary-eyed. And that was the way our generation was, because the parents we had and dads who told us to respect those things. So what we've missed out over the last few years, the last generation, is the family unit's been destroyed. Dads are no longer in the household. Within the black community, they're men who really think it's cool not to be responsible for the most important thing they have in their life, and that's their wife and their kids. So we're told a different view. Those four tenets I just mentioned. If you get away from that, you get what we have today, in which people are really struggling just to find out what the truth is. And you do have an ideology that has no shame when it comes down to being dishonest. We have to keep an eye on that.
And the other thing is, it doesn't seem like it's intent on finding solutions. So there's a lot of people pointing out problems and doubling down on anger and division, but those same people don't seem to be saying, how do we solve it? So yes, if there's problems, how do we come together and fix it? And I think that's a key difference between the Democrat Party and our party. And I am going to talk about critical race theory right now, because this is something that's being pushed right now by the Democrat Party, really in our schools. You've brought up legislation against it. So first I want to ask you, what is critical race theory?
Yeah.
And then we'll talk about your legislation.
It's, again, growing up in the 60s is nothing but white supremacy repackaged and wokeness. It's the idea that there is a superior race and an inferior race. You have to understand every policy, every tenet that comes from critical race theory is based on the fact that blacks just cannot do what other people do.
Really?
Whether it be called white privilege, whether it be called the fact that math now, 2 + 2 = 4, is now racist because they don't think blacks can actually think that way, so why make them do something that only white people can do? Whether it be something in the NFL just happened just recently. Here's something, Rona, that bothers me to no end. Because when we really find and see true racism, it's always on the same side. And when we see it, it's never talked about. NFL just 2 weeks ago apologized for, we have this compensation for brain injuries.
Yes.
It's a big deal.
Traumatic brain injuries,
yes.
Yep.
Well, they put an algorithm, it's called race norming, that end up predicting that blacks were less intelligent and therefore they were not paid as much for the same injury as white players. I know, our mouths drop because we realize total, absolute racism.
Total racism.
This is something that Goodell should be fired for because they went through this and there's thousands of players who were not paid what they deserve because of this racistness. End of the day, have we heard about it? Not. Only on Fox News was it brought up once or twice, and it's gone away, and Goodell stands up there and does his thing as he talks about everything else. No, we're going to find the true racism is always in the Democratic Party. If you want to know where true misery is going on, where kids are not being taught how to think, where teenagers are not given an opportunity to work jobs in those communities, where the family unit has been destroyed, it's always in blue cities and always in blue states. Where was all the destruction of business owners, black business owners? It's always in blue districts. So what we have to recognize is, as nice as it might sound, they're hiding behind a nice concept of fairness as they destroy my community. And I have no tolerance for it. I've seen it firsthand. My generation of teenagers, we now get together and say, it's so unfortunate that we didn't have a chance to live today where we could have spent time and played games and dated, all those things that we just couldn't do because we were the kind of the pioneers at the time. I do not want our kids to have that same regret to wake up one day.
And to grow up being taught in school, one, that one race is less capable or not able to achieve in America the same as another, which is inherently promoting racism and division. It is such a divisive education platform. You've brought up legislation against it. Tell me about your legislation that you've proposed.
The legislation basically says, because these decisions in terms of what being taught should always be done on the state level.
Yeah.
So the legislation says that on the federal level, it is no longer legal to teach critical race theory to federal employees. And then we have a letter that goes out that talks about the detrimental, the evil of this ideology. One of the things that, Rona, we have to understand is what we're up against. Again, I mentioned earlier, our country is built on the Judeo-Christian values. That is what's made our country so unique. My goal very simply is start teaching our history again, taking special orders in Congress and letting people realize that together we've done some remarkable things. One of the things we have to recognize is that we've been battling against cultural Marxism for a long time. Mm-hmm. And it was Karl Marx who said the first battleground is rewriting of history. We rewrite our history, not only do we lose pride in our past, appreciation for where we are today, but also vision for where we want to head off to. And that's exactly what's happening.
I've never heard that before. So he says the first path to Marxism is to rewrite history.
The first battleground is the rewrite of history, and that's exactly what's happening.
Exactly what's happening.
So when you rewrite history, all of a sudden those tenets, the foundation that brings us together. Think about what we the people mean. We find those things in common, whether it be our flag, our God, our team, sport team, belief in a judicial system that is fair. All those things that really say, okay, we can agree to disagree, but we have these things we can come together on. We can enjoy, and then we go out and debate other things. They have gone after every single one of them.
Yeah.
When they start playing around with our sports, we have some issues.
Exactly.
When all of a sudden standing up for the flag, putting our hand over our heart becomes a political statement. We have to go after those who allow that to happen. That's why I've not watched NFL, NBA in 2 years.
You haven't watched the NFL in 2 years?
I will not watch NFL until Goodell is fired. So I might be a lifetime commitment, but whatever it takes.
That's a major statement for you to be an NFL player, to be so upset with what's happened with the NFL to not watch your team, the Raiders.
Yeah, I tell you, Rona. Well, I was blessed again. I saw what principal looked like. And at some other point, I love to tell more stories about my dad, but I saw in real life as kids what principles look like. And what principle comes down to is you set aside those things that are convenient, things you might like, for the good of something that's really more important. Right now, there's nothing more important in our country, my particular race. That's why I'm here, to make sure that people recognize the contribution my race gave this country, that we've never been hapless and hopeless. We've been, just like every other race, committed to our country, commanding respect by winning, not demanding, not begging. We command it by winning. And once you see how much we've won, people can't have to walk away and say, wow, I had no idea what your parents and grandparents, what they did. Remarkable people. And that's what we need to get back to.
I love that point. And I think going back to sports, when you talked about the NFL, I'm going to switch sports really quick and go over to MLB, because you're right. There's this wokeness and this whole cancel culture, but we're seeing it now, racism being used in election laws.
Yeah. And
Democrats, even the president, labeling laws as Jim Crow laws that are not Jim Crow laws, and using racism to further a point, and really demeaning what the horror of racism is by doing so. But look at the MLB moving their game away from Cobb County, predominantly African-American community in Atlanta, to Colorado because of this corporate pressure, this wokeness. How do you feel when you see things like that happening? It's not just, corporate America and sports. I mean, it's permeating every aspect of our lives right now.
Think about the premise that we're now hearing from the leftists. The blacks are too ignorant, too uneducated, too lazy to go out and get an ID like the rest of the country.
Exactly. I think that is so racist to say
demeaning,
that.
It's racist. And guess who they hurt in the process of moving from Atlanta, and 67% black community,
yeah,
from Atlanta to Denver. These people have no shame, and that's what we have to understand. The thing that I grew up in, and let me just make this point because it's so important for people to put in context the community I grew up in. Because of those tenets I just talked about before, faith, family, free market, and education, the black community in the 40s, 50s, and 60s was the fastest growing in terms of the middle class. Men matriculated from college, men committed to marriage. Over 70% of black men committed to their families because of their faith,
yeah,
because they knew that if they didn't, they were looked at as whiners and weenies and wimps, period. We just didn't accept people who did not take care of their families. And the other part was with the free market. We had 40% again was business owners. That 40% equated to across our country, not just Tallahassee, but Texas and D.C. and California had family being part of the middle class. 50 to 60% were middle class. That was the environment I grew up in. What's happened this last 2020, what's happened in Atlanta, they're after the business owners. They're after the middle class. Business ownership in this country is what powers our middle class. It gives an understanding of service and looking at each other from inside out versus outside in. It's the most embracive community. It's one that just came from just striving to get to where they are, so they have a true understanding and blessings of where they are, and they will never become, quote, elitists. If you destroy the business ownership, you destroy the middle class, you empower and grow the elitists and grow the dependency. That's what's happening to the black community.
You move that out, then all you have is those who are in poverty, and then you have those who are abundantly wealthy.
The black community went from 40% of black ownership to 3.8%. You see now what's happening where you have black kids growing up never have a chance to see an example of what a black business owner looks like, other than being in a barbershop or being a preacher. And then, of course, unfortunately, we have these black elitists, which is the worst thing that's happened to us. By the way, it was not white supremacists that did my community in. It was black elitism. It was these narcissists, these folks who cared more about their power, their prestige, their profitability, and just like little matadors opened up the door for these leftists to come in and destroy my community. So that's what I'm excited about right now. What we have today is now the black community is waking up. We're finding people saying, you know what, I want my kids to have a good education. I want to have the opportunity to go out and get a job and provide for myself. I want to be able to live my American dream. And we're beginning to trend away from the Democratic Party, which is why the borders are opening up like never before.
Yeah.
They realize they're losing us. They're losing Hispanics. They're losing the Asians. They're losing those of us who recognize and understand what it is to finally be empowered. And that's what's happened the last 4 years, by the way. We have people who finally said, this is how it feels to be free. I'm moving forward, and I don't need the Democratic Party to tell me any more that I'm a victim.
Yeah, well, that's a big part of what the RNC does. Being in communities that have been habitually Democrat.
Which I appreciate what you did,
Yeah,
by the way. That was awesome.
And saying, hey, let us introduce you to our party, because those tenets you talked about, faith and family, but also hard work and education, school choice, those are things our party stands for. But when we're in Black communities at a longer level, in a more sustained level, and we're saying, let me introduce you to the Republican Party, stop letting the Democrat Party take your vote for granted. What are they actually doing to improve your community? And let me show you what Republican policies have done, because we're going to make it easier to get that loan for a small business. We're going to make it easier for your child to have choice in school. Those are things that I think most people don't understand about our party, and that is why we are seeing inroads with Hispanic, African American, and Asian voters.
What it comes down to, and this is my frustration for years, we had the Democratic Party took the Black community for granted, and the Republican Party just didn't think there was a chance, so they didn't do anything about it. What we need to do, and comes down to any time we want to develop relationships, it has to be about service. It has to be rolling up the sleeves, having conversations, and developing a friendship and a trust that you truly are looking out for each other's best interests.
Yeah.
What happened in Michigan was very simply the Black community began to understand that these folks are here. They're here to answer my questions. I might not agree with everything, but they're doing something that the Democratic Party is not doing. They're listening. This last 4 years, you have the lowest unemployment in the history of our country for Blacks, Hispanics, Asian, women, veterans. You have Black ownership rising either 200 or 400%. It was crazy numbers. Black business ownership. People said, you know what, I will take a risk. I'll invest in my community. I'll have my kids come in and take my legacy. That's buy-in to our country, and that's belief in what our country is all about. When you do that, you can no longer vote with the leftists. You just can't do it. You realize that you're betraying yourself and our future, and that's what's happening within the Black community. So,
and it's not just about talk; it's about results. And I think our party has shown that we're actually delivering results right now, and it happened under President Trump. And I think with you coming into Congress and the diversity we've seen in this freshman class, which were of the 15 new freshman members, were all either from the minority community, veterans, or women.
Yeah.
We are a party that's representing the America that we live in, and there is diversity in our party, and I think that is so important. And I love when you talk about your 4 tenets, and one of them is religion.
Yes.
You and I share the same faith. We talked about that early on. I just dropped my daughter off in Utah for college. We're both members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Tell me about the assault on religious freedoms that we're seeing, and how important it is that we protect religious freedom as the United States of America, something that is a key tenet of our Constitution.
Yeah. Well, again, it's important to know our history. Not only do we have to recognize how great our country is, unlike any in the history of mankind, but it's only because the seeds were planted. And those seeds have blossomed over the centuries now to where we have the opportunities we have today. Our country is built on the fact that we believe in a God. It doesn't matter how we worship Him, but because we do, we have the ability to give space to others to either worship or not. It doesn't matter to us. We just want to be the kind of people that bring value to others. That's the core of our nation. We're the nation that serves. We're the nation that reaches outside the box to find solutions for ourselves and for others. We're the nation that says these 9 words that really speaks to who Americans are. If I can do it, you can do it. And because of that, we have to realize there is an enemy at our doorstep. And as we go out and live out in our freedom bubble, we go out and we build our businesses, we raise our kids, we build memories, we look at retirement one day. There's always this evil at our doorsteps that sometimes we're not aware of. It might take a Pearl Harbor, or 9/11, or 2020 to find out, whoa, I had no idea. I am this close to losing our freedom to build a business. to go to church, to put
go
our
to
kids in
church,
school.
yeah.
I mean, whoever thought that would happen? So when you start taking away the freedom of religion, that's an empowerment. One thing about those of us who believe in a God in heaven, we fear and respect him more than we do others. So I can make a statement, I can stand strong, because I can care less what other people think as long as Heavenly Father is happy with me. And at the end of the day, if you have people thinking that way, seeking his blessings, then we know to do that, we have to serve other people. We have to be good. We have to find a way to, if we said something wrong, let that sink in and say, okay, I will never do that again. If we were not courageous and we should have been, okay, I will never do that again. So we make those decisions to become better people because we have such a high standard that we're working toward to be blessed. And we know we'll never get there. And that's the thing about this nation. We will never be perfect, as much as the leftists think they are.
Yeah, they do. They think they're perfect.
Their standards, man, are unbelievable. That's because they see themselves as true gods, and of course, no one can do it the way they do it. So they're so willing to judge other people and other generations. And meanwhile, they have done nothing to bring value to the table. But those of us who understand that we're not going to be perfect, we just look back at our lives and say, okay, I realized during my journey, I learned a whole lot. I learned how to be more humble, how to be more patient, how to really empathize more. Those are things we learn, and only because we have a standard Heavenly Father who loves us, who's patient, who gives us second chances all the time, and then we become better nations because of it. And that's why this country is nothing like it in history of mankind, like who we are right now.
And we're founded on religious freedom. And when you take that away and you start demonizing or not allowing people to practice their faith, that's a problem. And I feel like the left, like you said, the rewriting of history, but also removing our ability to go to church or believe in our own faiths, or demonizing religious beliefs is a big part of what they're doing to hurt the fabric of this country. Along with the wokeness and the cancel culture, it is another thing that's under assault from the left.
It is, and this is why when I look at life's plans, life is all about ups and downs, and every one of us has gone through downtime. And sometimes we say, why me and how? But you look back on life and say, no, that was the best thing that could have happened to me. 2020, we're going to look back on, as painful as it was, as many of us lost loved ones, we lost businesses, all those things that happened. What Heavenly Father does for us, in this country particularly, is we go through contrast. We have to sometimes see the bad to appreciate the good. And I tell you what, we are waking up in a big way. This is going to be one of the greatest opportunities for Americans to finally have conversations that we never had before. Yeah. Democrats, independents, Republicans, we're talking about what just happened and realize it's not going to happen again. We're not going to let the left, now that we understand who they are, to ever do this to us again. So it's been a blessing for us.
Because we do live in the greatest nation. And one of the prettiest states, and I'm a little biased, is your home state of Utah.
Yes.
I think it's gorgeous. Your district is just stunning. And you joined the conservative Western Caucus. I think I said it correctly.
Yes.
And part of the issues that your district deals with, and I want to talk about that, are things like grazing rights, federal encroachment on lands, water rights. Talk about some of the things that your state and Western states deal with, and why you joined that caucus in Congress.
Well, we believe in taking care of the nature. We believe in the beauty of our state. And you're right, it is a beautiful state. You see, whether it be the snow country or down where the rural areas are, which I'm now falling in love with. I didn't realize that we had sheep herders and mink breeders and all those things. But what the Western Caucus recognizes, first of all, decisions should be made in the state level. Mm-hmm. Land should be decided upon based on state decisions and what's best for us. We believe in conservation. We believe in water rights, that we should have the right in the most basic lower levels to make those decisions. It really does come down to a caucus, and like many others, that truly believe in that concept of federalism, that the state should be dealing and making decisions based on the people. We the people, that's where we're the closest. And so we're taking the issues. Right now we're going through a drought. So we're now trying to figure out, not only now, but in the future, how can we make sure that these kind of issues don't happen? And we can do it better than D.C. because we understand exactly what the solutions are. We just need to have the rights and freedoms to navigate and be innovative. Innovation comes from we the people, individuals, and if we're allowed to do that, the things we can come up with are remarkable. We just have to get the government out of the way and allow us to do our thing.
Yeah, maybe don't let the government come in and tell you how to run your state and take over your lands.
Take over all the lands. I mean, they have an amazingly aggressive, I think it was 2030, to take over 30%.
Yes.
Of our lands. These are lands that we the people should be dealing with, figuring out how to create funds to take care of our education, to give entrepreneurs an opportunity to go out there and do what they have to do. Those are things we should be deciding on, not a group of people in D.C. who live in this little bubble and make a lot of money, very, very secure, risk-free as long as they can stay in office. That's not America.
Well, you just hit on something that I don't think a lot of people know, that there is an actual project for the federal government to take over 30% of the lands
by 2030.
By 2030, it's called the 3030 Project. And I heard Governor Ricketts actually talk about this yesterday, and he said that would be approximately the size of 2 states of Texas being taken over by the federal government, which for a state like Utah, one that would be your whole state, taken over by the federal government. But these are huge issues for people to recognize the overreach of the Biden administration. It's not just in our voting rights. It's not just in energy policy. It's not just in things that we're seeing every day on the news. For people in states like yours, it is an absolute takeover of lands that should belong to your state being appropriated by the federal government. That's a huge issue.
It's huge, and it goes right down to the topics we've talked about before. What happens when we own our land? We can decide. It's like what entrepreneurs do. What happens when entrepreneurs can own their own business? They make decisions, they can be innovative, and they find out ways to have win-win situations because they control their decisions. When government takes over land, they take over opportunities for us to do the same thing. It's like stealing people's opportunity to run a business, to have their own legacy. I've never, we thought that the Biden administration would not quite get it. I had no idea how much we were right about that.
Well, it's how they view government, right? Everything should be centralized in Washington. We just saw this voting rights power grab. Now they want to take your lands. They want to have all the power centralized in Washington, D.C., because then they have the reins. And we are a party that believes very strongly in states' rights. And why? Because keeping it closer to the people, but more than that, the rights of the people, like you said, to own their own land, to own their own business, to have that opportunity. And for me, that is so American. That's such an American ideal. And Biden gets off looking like this nice guy. The media kind of helps him. But in the reality, people don't realize you are losing a lot right now with this administration, with what they want to take over and move to Washington and take away from the states.
It's called cultural Marxism. And let me just kind of highlight just quickly what the mindset of a business owner is and why it's so unique. Because a business owner whose basic idea is to find a win-win to make a profit, she's the person that says, come to my place, come with a bad day, and I'm going to make sure you leave with a good day, because I want you to come back tomorrow and do the same thing. So that means that they're service-oriented, they're disciplined in terms of how people feel or what they say. They want to make sure that everybody feels embraced and welcomed. That's what business owners do. What does the government do? I'm here from 9 to 5. Anything after and before 9 or after 5, you figure it out. I'll come back tomorrow.
Yeah,
it is
so
a
true.
totally different way of looking at people. Business owners have to look at people in ways of service and be very innovative, because they truly want them to decide on their own to come back. When you get to government, when they can force you to come back, why even go through the efforts of trying to figure out what they care about? That's the difference in our way of building an economy in China and Cuba and Iran with dictatorships. We're not one, and I'll tell you what the left does not understand is they're waking up a sleeping giant.
Yeah.
When the American people start talking the way we're now talking, when mothers wake up and realize their children cannot go to school,
I know, because I'm one of those. I'm a mama bear. But you're right,
up.
These conversations, and this is a big part of this podcast, is these conversations are taking place all across this country right now. And people are saying, wait, I thought Biden would bring us back to normalcy and he'd be great. But now I can't go to my local restaurant because they can't hire anybody because the government's paying people more not to work. Yeah. Or wait, he promised my kids would be back in school, but my kids still haven't been in school. And all these things are starting to resonate with voters, even with the media not being honest and protecting Biden, even the border. Wait, Kamala Harris was supposed to be in charge of this. Look at how bad it is at our border. This isn't good for anyone, even the people who are trying to get into our country. So there's so much going on. I just want to end by asking you two quick questions. And one's personal. You talk about your dad. Yeah. You talk about this great family that you were raised in. How do you think they feel or would feel about you being in Congress right now? Did as a little boy, was this even, and I can't even imagine it would be with how you grew up, was this even something on your radar screen that you would eventually be a congressman?
No, none of it is. I never thought I'd go to the NFL. I just wanted to get an education. So I think what I'm most proud of is we were taught in a community I grew up in that you did what you had to do. You fought through the issues to make your community proud and make your name, the name of your parents proud. So you upheld the name. And I'm so thankful I grew up during that time because I'm doing my very best to uphold the Owens name. And I do that just by being as honest as I can, be as courageous as I can. And you learn, by the way, to be courageous by sometimes not being courageous. You look back and say, oh my goodness, how did I do that? Anyway, my point is, I think they'll be proud of the entire family. We've taken their legacy. We've taken on. We're still a close family.
All your kids live in Utah, in your district, right?
All my 6 kids.
6 kids.
6 kids and 15 grands, which makes the District 4 the most important district in the history of mankind for me. So
you're like breeding your constituents.
It really works out. But no, I'm thankful, to be honest with you, to be in a position where I was first of all taught to appreciate this country and given the understanding of how to fight and how to put God, country, family first. So that's the legacy of my parents, and my goal is to make sure my kids feel the same way and they can teach the same to their other kids.
And then my last question, and I have to ask because I'm a big football fan. We're an NFL family. We're Lions fans.
Lions.
It's so hard.
I know.
You gotta feel for us, right?
I got empathy big time.
My son's like, Mom, why did you raise me to be a Lions fan? What were you thinking? We're always rooting for the Lions, but what's harder? Going against the toughest, you were defensive player, right? Yeah. You were safety. What is tougher? Going against the most difficult, best offense, top quarterback, best running back, best wide receiver, or going up against Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats in Congress? That's
a good question. And I'll say this, and this is a good one to end on. My last year with the Raiders, it was a culture. It was a culture of, and many guys don't remember, it was the second chance and last chance for many players. But I remember being on the field and thinking that I wanted to do everything I could not to let the team down. I had so much confidence in everybody else. I did not want to be the weak link. And I think about everybody who's on that field, even the kicker, Ray Guy, who came in only 3 times a game, but his kick put us in great position. What I learned is that everyone on that team had a part to play, some more time on the field than others, but they all played the part and they did the job. Our country needs to do the same thing. We as a country, as a team, we all have a part to play, and it could be those who donate, those that give a platform like you're doing right now, those who might just talk with their parents or their kids and just be patient. We all have a part to play. And if we do our job, that means we're coming out of the stands, we're coming off the bench, we're on the field now, and we do our part as a country, we just win.
And we're going to win in 2022.
As Al Davis said, just win, baby.
Just win, baby. I love it. Thank you so much. So great to be with you. Thank you, Burgess.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
I'm Ronna McDaniel, and this is what Republicans stand for. Join us next time on Real America.